What is up, everybody, and welcome to FLW Videos. In today's episode, we're going to be talking all about a naming mechanic for your Pokemon in Pokemon Go, along with some search functions that you can do. There's been so many updates recently regarding to Lucky Pokemon, Alolan Pokemon, Mythical Pokemon, just so many things going on that I figured it would be a good time to go ahead and review that as well. So in today's episode, we will be reviewing all of those different techniques, along with a screenshot that you can take to keep, which I do think will be helpful. And then we'll get into the naming mechanic that I actually use for all of my Pokemon. I've actually had a lot of people ask questions about something like this, like what does everything mean? Well, this is going to be the video for that. I'm also trying to hit 100,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So let's go ahead and go through the naming mechanics. If we go ahead and take a look at the first one, that is specifically for the Pokemon's name. This is why you should never put the Pokemon's name in your nickname mechanic, because it can always override your nickname and you can basically search it even if it's not in the name. For example, with this Tyranitar, we can search it even though Tyranitar is not in the nickname. So I would not recommend you to put the Pokemon's name in the actual nickname. Up next is the nickname mechanic, and yes, we are going to be using this to our advantage, but we're not going to put something in there like my baby. We're going to put more prevalent information, but we will be going over that once we clear through this list. Up next is the Pokedex number. For me personally, that is something that I've never used before. I don't see too much of a reason to use it. Up next is the CP. Now this is kind of interesting because you can actually check multiple CPs. For instance, if you were catching Pokemon on a community day, you could actually put in a list of different CPs for 100 IVs for that Pokemon. There is a little bit of crossover, so for me personally, I do not like to use that method. Up next is the HP. That's going to be a big no for me. I don't see why you would want to specifically look up the HPs. Up next is the move. Now this is interesting. For the most part, if you do want to do this, you don't have to put it in your name mechanic, which is great. You can still query using this, but for instance, I would mostly focus on the charge moves and not the quick moves, so we'll probably give this one an okay. Up next is the move typing. This is kind of cool, but the only caveat to it is the fact that it's either one or both of the different typing, so I kind of don't like that. I would rather know, maybe if you could choose just one as far as the charge move, or you could do both, that would be more important to me. But because it can pull back Pokemon with one or the other and it doesn't distinguish the charge move or quick move, that's going to be a no for me. Up next is moves boosted by weather. That's actually pretty cool. That's something that I haven't really explored, but I could see that being at least somewhat useful. Up next is the species family line. Now this is something that is very helpful if you are trying to just pull up everything from a specific type, especially when you're trying to evolve or just try to calculate how many you have. So we will go ahead and give this one a check. Let's go ahead and move on to the keyword searches. We've got the Pokemon typing. We have the gym defenders. Now this is really weird as far as the gym defenders is concerned, because if you nickname a Pokemon defender, it will not show up, which is kind of a weird thing. I ended up discovering this by accident. Up next is evolvable Pokemon. This is very helpful if you are doing any types of tasks related to evolving. This is going to be the way that you can check it very quickly. Up next is the different labels, I guess, that you can assign to Pokemon, whether it's going to be a legendary, a shiny, a mythical, Alolan forms. I actually didn't know about the Alolan forms, so it is cool to kind of revisit this list. Up next is traded Pokemon. Now this is something that I wasn't familiar with as well. So if you are curious as to what Pokemon you have traded besides just going in and looking at the trade emblem, you can type in traded, which is a pretty cool process. And then finally we have the lucky Pokemon. But beyond that, you have logical operations. I went ahead and highlighted it so you can see it point out, but basically you can add on more than one criteria to it if you use one of these. So when we talk about the naming mechanic that I use, typically we just kind of need to break it down into the different parts, and we'll be going over some different examples. So as you will see, there's just kind of a set of 2 or 3 random letters, and what those actually mean is assigned to the type of move that the Pokemon has. For instance, with the normal FA, that means normal fairy. So if we went to go look at Slacking, we would see that it's going to be a normal move, which is Yawn in this case, and then a fairy type move. For instance, up next we have Mewtwo with a PP. Yeah, haha, funny, right? Yeah, PP for Psychic. So if we go check, I know that it's going to be Confusion Psychic. And then up next we've got like a PGH. That means Psycho Cut, Psychic, Shadow Ball. And then I guess for anyone who's kind of curious, well, what happens when you kind of like get stuck between things where there's like more than one move, for instance, of a particular type? I guess in this case, the P would be a good example for Mewtwo and for this Mewtwo as well, where they have Psycho Cut and Confusion. Well, basically Psycho Cut does better versus Psychic type Pokemon, so I automatically know that this will be Psycho Cut. And then for instance, if you are using it as just a normal Psychic type attacker, then I would use the Confusion instead. So go ahead and scroll down a little bit and you'll start to pick up on it. For instance, we have a WW for Water. I'll go ahead and put a graphic up of all of the ones that I use. You can definitely change it or kind of do your own variation of it for sure. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one, and that's going to be the check mark. So basically what the check mark means is it is the ideal moveset that you want to have. So what I typically do, for instance, we would need to put one on this one, but other than that, that just means that it is the ideal moveset. And the most important reason, I guess, for why I do this is a situation where I end up getting something, for instance, like a Houndoom is a perfect example, because Houndoom can know Crunch and it can know Foul Play. Foul Play is a better move, so what I'll do is I will put that check mark once it has Foul Play. In this case, if it has Crunch, I'll either put an X or I'll put nothing and I just need to add it to it, but that lets me know whether or not it is the ideal moveset. So the next thing that we need to talk about is probably the more obvious one, and that's like the first set of numbers. That's what I personally put for the IVs. And the reason why I don't put it on the end is because the IVs will not change, but the level can change. So for instance, when we have like this level 34, it's not going to always be level 34. If I power it up to 34.5, then I'll just put in something like this, and then so it just makes it real easy to go up as your level goes up, which will make it so much easier to keep up with. Like I said, that's really the main reason why I don't put the IVs on the end. Other than that, I do a couple of tricks just to kind of like keep up with organization. So for instance, I'm saving all of these Pokemon for Generation 4. And then one other naming mechanic that I do, which I will be changing this soon, is if I need to power up a Pokemon, I just put a plus sign there, only because alphabetically speaking, it gets put to the top. Now these are Pokemon that I plan on powering up at some point. I'm just not done with it yet. So for instance, once I get them up to level 30 or so, I'm definitely going to just take the plus sign off. And it just kind of like varies in different cases. For instance, check out this Metagross. It's a high IV one, but it's at level 15, so I am gonna have to put in some work for it. So that's just basically an easy way for me to keep up with that. So yeah, that is my personal naming technique that I use. If you want to do something like this, and hopefully it did inspire you, there's so many more things that you can do as well, such as something called Unicoding, where you can put in the number for the IVs of like the attack, defense, and stamina stat, and it only counts it as one character. So if someone in the comment section below has an idea for what they like to do, definitely leave it in the comment section and provide some instructions for people if they want to use your method. But with that being said, I hope you did enjoy this episode, and I will see you next time.
Hit me like a tidal wave.